Hearing him, that young soldier's back flinched, and he froze. He turned around hesitantly, but didn't dare go over. The situation at hand didn't allow for any time wasted. Seeing his hesitation, temper flared in Shelian's chest, but he forced it down. "Don't be scared," he said. "I won't do anything to you. Get over here, quick." At last, that boy moved. He rushed close to Shelian's side, but came to an abrupt stop 2 feet away. Shelian sucked in a breath silently and extended a hand toward him. "Help me up," he said. "Take me away." That young soldier very carefully took that hand and grasped it. It was like a man on the brink of death had finally found someone to rely on, and in an instant, Shelian's entire body slackened and collapsed onto that boy. Sunken deep in the tender fragrance, his temperature was high, his body burning. Yet somehow that boy's hands were equally as hot, and there was even a slight trembling. Shelian leaned on him for a bit, saved some energy, then inhaled and pushed himself to stand. He didn't want to have someone smaller than him support his person entirely, but with the boy's help, they walked agonizingly for several steps. Those flower demons called out to him when they saw them move away. "No, Your Highness, don't leave us. He's waiting for you on the road, so if you leave here, you'll bump into him." "Who's he?" Shelian demanded. Speaking of that person, even the land of the tender was slightly terrified. After some hesitation, they mumbled, "He is him." The flowers all nodded to each other. "He is him, the one who brought us here." Even if they didn't dare to speak of that person's name or identity, that half-crying, half-smiling mask immediately appeared in Shelian's mind. "So what you're saying is if I go back now, then the one who planted all of you will hunt me down halfway on the road. But if I stay here, he won't come, correct?" The flower demons were pleased and chattered as they nodded their heads. Fury burst into flames in Shelian's chest. To trap him without killing him in this hateful situation, were they playing with him? Why not simply just battle to the death? He collected himself and forced down his irritation. It seemed that the other party had no intention of facing him head on and only wanted to damage his spiritual power, to make him fall from grace and lose followers. The flower demons may not be speaking the truth, but even if they told lies, if he thought about it, even though this boy could support him or carry him on his back, they still might not be able to return safely. Should the other party purposely throw some woman at them halfway down the road, the situation might get even worse or more awkward. After some consideration, Shelian exhaled a feverish breath and closed his eyes. "Take me to the cave over there," he said. The young soldier followed his instructions and helped him cross over the ground piled with corpses. When they came before the cave, Shelian gasped in a low voice, "Stop." That little soldier halted. Even just raising a hand, Shelian shook uncontrollably. "Where's your sword?" he asked. That boy supported him with his left arm and freed his right to take out his sword. Shelian extended his hand, rolled up the sleeves, and revealed a small part of his arm. Under the white moonlight, it was smooth and pale like the softest white jade. The boy suddenly held his breath, but Shelian didn't notice. Shelian ordered in a low voice, "Stab me." The hand that held up the worn sword immediately dropped. Shelian prompted, "Don't worry, just stab and stab deeply. I need to draw an array." There aren't any other spiritual devices on hand, so there needs to be blood. However, that young soldier protested. "Your Highness, please use my blood," he said, and he raised his own arm and carved without holding back. Shelian hurriedly said, "No need, your blood." But his words didn't make it in time. A deep gash had already appeared on that boy's arm, fresh blood flowing from it. Shelian sighed. Never mind. Shelian's blood was an invaluable holy treasure, so how could a mortal's blood compare? But seeing how sincere this little soldier was, he couldn't bear to tell him that what he'd done was pointless. Instead, Shelian said, "Thanks, but we still need some of my blood as a catalyst." Thus, Shelian took that sword, and with trembling hands, it took him a few tries before successfully stabbing into the center of his arm. Crimson holy blood streamed down his white arm and dripped into 2 curved lines before the cave, drawing 2 barriers. It could be said to be a waste of God's gift. Shelian also took care to mix in some of that boy's blood, and after completing the array, his dizziness grew stronger. "Let's go in," he said. It was dark inside the cave. That boy took out a small flare torch from inside his robes. He ignited it, and the firelight brightened their surroundings with intense light. That young soldier's face was hidden behind the bandages, covering him completely. Yet Shelian's discomposure was open for all to see. His cold sweat was sticky, his hair disheveled, his lips red and swollen. It was the cut created when he bit his lips to sanctify his own sword earlier. The firelight stabbed at Shelian's eyes, hurting them, and the waves of heat were also torturing him. Shelian demanded immediately, "Don't light the fire, kill it." That boy immediately threw the small flare torch on the ground and stepped to extinguish it, and they sank into darkness once more. After being helped into the cave, Shelian sat down in a meditative position. A moment later, he spoke laboriously. "I have a mission for you. Can you do it?" That boy dropped to the ground, kneeling. "I'm willing to risk my life to do my duty," he said. Shelian painfully restrained his heavy breathing and said with forced calm, "I drew 2 sets of barriers in front of the cave. The outer barrier is to ensure that nothing outside gets in, and the inner barrier is to prevent anyone inside from getting out." He gasped harshly for air, then continued, "There's enough space between the 2 barriers for 1 person. Stay there and watch over the cave entrance. No matter what you hear outside, don't go out. Same logic, don't come in no matter what sounds you hear from me." That boy was slightly perplexed. "Your Highness, you're staying here by yourself?" "Yes," Shelian said. "I don't know what I'll do. In any case, you can't come in no matter what." Under the circumstances, Shelian couldn't leave, but waiting for reinforcements. Chirong was probably still stumbling down the road, and just the trip back to the royal capital would take a long while. Who knew when reinforcements would come? He could only seal off the small area temporarily, set off wards, and figure out a way to treat that tender fragrance. He rasped, "Fruits born of flower demons are powerful temptresses. They're most likely going to ripen soon." Just then, the fragrance in the air suddenly surged, cutting off his words. That gentle, infectious scent filled the air from the earth to the sky, and the flower demons let out ecstatic, delicate cackling. They trumpeted, my root is hard. The fruits have ripened." Smelling that exceedingly sweet fragrance, Shelian could feel his heart beating faster, and blood rushed to his brain. He gritted his teeth. "Hurry and go," he shouted. "Don't breathe in that scent, and if they get close, don't be scared. Nothing can cross that blood line, but as long as your feet remain inside the barrier, you can strike them with your sword." That boy glanced outside and nodded with conviction. He rushed out with the sword in hand, stationing himself between the two bloodlines by the entrance of the cave. Outside the cave, in that field of corpses, bushes of flower shrubberies grew vividly in color. That briar field was quivering as if something beneath was about to rupture the ground. Soon there was indeed something that broke out. It was the head of a woman. That woman's head sprouted from beneath the soil, breathed in the fresh air above ground, and looked to be drunk with joy, her eyes squeezing shut into crescent lines. Following immediately after was a round and smooth shoulder, and then an entire arm crawled out. The fruits of the land of the tender were formed under the whiskers of their roots. When their fruits ripened, they took shape in various forms of women. The time of ripening had come, and countless naked women broke out from the earth. They raised their arms to pluck those bright red blossoms from their heads and bathed under the moonlight, stretching their limbs to their heart's content. It was those little flowers that emitted that fragrant scent. But now the ones secreting that sweet odor were those enchanting women. They patted off the remaining mud on their bodies, fixed their hair, and walked toward the cave, giggling seductively. "Your Highness," they said, "we're coming." That sweet fragrance also suffocatingly filled the interior of the cave. Shelian sat in the lotus position with his eyes closed, chanting the Ethics Sutra mentally. Yet it had little use. Those flower demons called out to him without shame, chirping familiar language like baby, sweetheart, Gurgur, Didi, all sorts of monikers, throwing his mind into turmoil. So Shelian changed to reciting out loud. 5 sights cause blindness, 5 sounds cause deafness, galloping hunts cause madness, rare goods cause obstructions, calm over impatience, coldness over heat, silence is the ultimate virtue. Those who are kind will receive kindness, those who are unkind will receive unkindness. Shelian had not noticed at all that the sutra he had memorized without fault was recited incoherently. Outside the cave, the flower demons clapped and laughed tauntingly. "My dear Crown Prince, my sweetheart, my good Highness, you're not a monk. Why are you reciting sutras?" Suddenly, there was shrieking all over, and it sounded like that young soldier had wordlessly become violently aggressive, chopping and slashing madly, chasing those flower demons away as they cried, "Murder!" Some yelled from far away, "You cursed little brat, little destroyer of beauty, no tenderness in your heart at all. Scary, scary, vicious at such an age, imagine him full grown." Those flower demons were trying to squish themselves into the cave like starving beasts, but they just couldn't squeeze in. They didn't notice the blood array on the ground and had thought that the blockage was caused by that boy. After some discussion, they gathered not too far away and called to him, "Little Gurgur, why must you block us from going in? It's not like we're going to do anything bad. We just want to have a good time with His Highness. Be good, little soldier, and don't hinder us from doing His Highness some good." That little Didi is so mean, a shame that he's so young, too tender. He probably doesn't even know what doing good means. The flower demons fell over themselves, over another round of mocking giggles, and Shelian blinked open his eyes slightly, only to see at the entrance of the cave stood a black shadow, one of that boy who, with a sword in hand, was determined to never move, even in death. Suddenly, one of the flower demons said, "I say, little Gurgur, don't stick yourself in there like a hard shaft. What are you planning? Why not come with me over there to have some fun? What sorts do you fancy? Do you like my type? That young soldier still didn't respond. Those flower demons thought that in order to enter the cave, they must pass by him. So they all brought forth their tricks, coddling with their words. What about me? How about this? Do you fancy my sort? Look at me. Do you like this? Yet, from flirtation at the beginning, changing to complaints, then to curses at the end, the boys still only ignored them if they were far away and struck at them if they were close. Shelley knew that before the land of the tender emerged from the ground, they could change their own shapes at will. He had wanted to warn the boy, but due to his current distressing predicament, he daren't open his mouth. Finally, when those pressing waves of heat passed, he was able to gasp, "Don't look at them." Just fighting against the hot blood rushing to his head already exhausted him, so Shelian's voice was terribly soft and low. But that young soldier instantly heard him and cried in response, "Yes, sir, Your Highness. How are you?" "I'm fine," Shelian said. "If things get too difficult, shut your eyes, seal your nose and your mouth." That young soldier hadn't had a chance to answer when another flower demon suddenly burst out laughing. "I know, little guy, I bet your favorite type must look like this." It sounded as if another new land of the tender had emerged. There was a sudden dead silence that blanketed outside the cave. That young soldier also seemed to have stopped breathing. The next second, the crashing waves of laughter of those flower demons surged against Shelian, drowning him. They clapped and screeched. "What a hand! What a hand! My God, how did you come up with this? It's the best." They laughed. "Look, that brat is completely stunned. I bet it's like this. It must be like this. And here I thought that shitty brat is a rock. Who knew we were wrong? Such balls at such an age. You win, we are nothing. How about it, little guy? Come quick and enjoy this sweet, delicious sight. There won't be another shop that serves this dish if you leave this land. If you don't seize your chance now, even if you dream for 800 years, you still won't be able to have a taste. Do you want us to give you a hand?" "That state," they giggled. The young soldier was thoroughly incensed, and his tone of voice was filled with frost. "You are seeking death," he shouted. At the same time, inside the cave, Shelian was about to reach his limit. His sight blurred and his ears drummed. He could no longer sit up straight. He collapsed forward and barely held himself from the ground with his hands. But this tumble loosened his gritted teeth, and in that moment of delirium, a painful, wretched moan escaped his lips.